Hey there, time travelers! Ready for another nostalgia trip back to the past? Hop in, because in today's video, we're traveling back to a time when it was everyone's dream to become the next members of the Turtle School of Martial Arts, where we would all learn the coveted Kamehameha. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a theory from Dragon Ball Super, involving the Future Grand Zeno and the evil Zamasu. Make sure you stick around until the end of the video to find out whether or not we believe the two characters are really the same character. Dragon Ball Super is responsible for introducing some of the best characters that the franchise has seen, many of which have become fan favorites, from the intense and hungry Lord Beerus to the absolutely adorable Omni King Grand Zeno. There was very little that we didn't love about Dragon Ball Super. Even the villains that we met have turned out to be some of the most interesting that we've seen in the series so far, specifically Zamasu. Zamasu was a Supreme Kai in training for Universe 10. He became corrupted as he began to see humanity and mortals in general as a scourge that had been plaguing the universe. He believed that he would be performing an act of justice to the universe if he could simply kill all of the mortals off. His beliefs almost directly countered the beliefs that the Supreme Kai stood by. The Kai firmly believed that they were not able to become directly involved in the actions made by mortals, but Zamasu believed that since they were so powerful, it was actually their obligation to get involved and save the universe from destroying itself. Zamasu ended up using the Super Dragon Balls to switch bodies with Goku in an alternate timeline where he proceeded to kill off humanity. Zamasu, who went by Goku Black while in that form, teamed up with another version of Zamasu from an alternate timeline, and the two became an absolutely devastating force of destruction. Lucky for that universe's future, the Goku that we all know and love sprang into action with the help of Future Trunks and the rest of the Z Fighters. Goku had the surprisingly good idea to summon a version of Zeno from that timeline and explain to him what Zamasu had done. This then prompted the Omni King to do what he does best and eliminate that entire universe. The universe, along with Zamasu, ceased to exist. This future Zeno was then brought to the Grand Zeno that Goku had met and befriended in his own timeline, and the two became the best of friends. Zeno and future Zeno ended up becoming inseparable, and though there are a few slight differences in the way they act, both of the Omni Kings are almost indistinguishable. But what if we told you that the future Zeno wasn't exactly what he seemed to be? In fact, there's a select group of Dragon Ball fans that firmly believe that future Zeno is really just Zamasu in disguise. First, take a look at how the two versions of the Grand Zeno act. Though they seem to both have very similar personalities and appear to be very innocent, I couldn't help but notice the difference in their movements. Whenever the Zeno that we met in Goku's timeline reacts to something by raising his hand, you'll notice that the future Zeno always uses the opposite hand before looking over at the current Zeno and correcting the action to be the same as his counterpart. This can mean one of two things. The first one is that the future Zeno is actually an entirely different version of Grand Zeno. Now, my biggest issue with that idea is that it really doesn't make sense. If Zeno is supposed to be the Omni King and the ruler of the entire multiverse, I don't think there would be multiple versions of him in existence at one time. Zeno isn't a part of the multiverse, he rules the entire thing. He's like an outsider, meaning that the rules of the multiverse don't apply to him. In other words, there shouldn't be multiple versions of the Omni King, as it would defeat the purpose of an Omni King in the first place. The second option is that the differences between the two Zenos are hinting at the possibility that the future Zeno isn't really a version of Zeno, and instead is an imposter, someone who either has the ability to shapeshift or has gotten their hands on the Super Dragon Balls and wished himself into another body, which is right up Zamasu's alley if you ask me. In fact, we know that this is something Zamasu has done in the past to further his goal. He gathered the Super Dragon Balls not once but twice already, in order to ensure that he could rid his universe of all things mortal. The first time he used the Super Dragon Balls, he wished that he and Goku's souls would switch places and he would be in Goku's body. He then went on to kill Goku and the rest of his family before using the time ring to travel to the timeline that Future Trunks came back from. That was where Zamasu, in the form of Goku Black, met up with the future Zamasu and allied with him, and the pair used the Super Dragon Balls once again to wish that the future Zamasu's body was indestructible. That being said, Zamasu, whether it be future Zamasu or the version of himself that became Goku Black, would still be in possession of a time ring, which would mean it would be relatively easy for them to travel to the future to a time when the Super Dragon Balls were recharged and able to be used again and wish himself into another body. Only this time he chose a being far more powerful than a Kai or a Saiyan. In fact, if this theory is accurate, Zamasu chose a body that was more powerful than a god of destruction. Think about it. Zeno would be the perfect target for the villain to switch bodies with. with. Not only would it offer him the protection of being the Omni King, but he would also be able to continue with his plan to wipe out all of the mortals in the universe without anybody questioning him whatsoever. This brings us to our next point. When it comes down to it, Zeno and Zamasu have goals that are pretty similar to one another. We know that Zamasu's initial plan was to cleanse his universe and get rid of all of the mortals, but think about what the Grand Zeno's intentions were when it came to the Tournament of Power. The rules of the tournament were simple. 8 out of the lower 12 universes would fight, Battle Royale style. The roster consisted of 10 of the strongest fighters from each of the universes, meaning that there were a total of 80 fighters. The only way to lose or get knocked out was to get thrown out of the ring, and any universe that lost all of its fighters would immediately be wiped from existence. By the end of the tournament, the winner would be decided by either being the last one standing or being the universe with the most fighters left when time ran out. That universe would not only be spared from destruction, but they would also get to use the Super Dragon Balls to wish for anything they wanted. Now, let's consider the entire purpose behind the tournament that would ultimately result in 7 out of the 8 competing universes disappearing and ceasing to exist. Before watching the Tournament of Destroyers, the Grand Zeno was originally planning on simply wiping the weakest universes from existence without giving them a fighting chance. His reasoning behind this appears to simply be that the average power level of the mortals that made up the 8 competing universes was just too low when compared to the other stronger universes. In other words, they were too weak, so the Omni King decided that they didn't deserve to exist. Does that sound a little bit like someone else's agenda? Zamasu has a clear disdain for mortals, and under the disguise of the Omni King, he would have the perfect excuse and the means to destroy not only the universe that he was residing in, but any universe that he deemed weak. If he did manage to wish himself into a position where he was in the body of the future Zeno, all he would have to do is work with the alternate version of Zeno to destroy as many universes as he saw fit, and no one would even dare to think about stopping him. One last thing I think we should be taking a look at for this theory is how the future Omni King reacted when Goku summoned him and explained what Zamasu was doing. Think about how quickly that version of Zeno was ready to snap his fingers and destroy that timeline, and every living being in it. He didn't question Goku whatsoever. As soon as it was requested, Zeno practically said, "Okay," and proceeded to destroy the universe. It happened so fast that Goku and his friends hardly had any time to get into their time machine and return to their timeline. Isn't it a bit odd that the Omni King was so ready to snap his fingers and destroy that universe? It's almost as if he had been waiting for someone to give him a reason to do it. Doesn't that almost strike you as something that Zamasu would do? I mean, we know that Zamasu is a smart character, otherwise he would not have been in line to become a Supreme Kai. So what if he knew that his plan to defeat all of the mortals on his own was futile, and in knowing that, he devised a new plan to switch places with the Grand Zeno, much as he did with Goku. And in the Grand Zeno's body, he would be more than capable of pulling off his plan to wipe all of the universes that he saw as worthless from existing in the multiverse. When it comes to my opinion on this particular theory, I have to say that I don't think Zamasu transferred himself into the future Grand Zeno. That being said, I do think that there is something fishy about the fact that the future Grand Zeno is an entirely different being from the Grand Zeno that Goku met the first time around. I don't quite understand how there can be two beings that are supposed to live outside of the boundaries of the multiverse that are supposed to be copies of one another. How can you not be affected by the rules of the multiverse, yet there can still be a multiversal copy of yourself? It just doesn't work in my opinion. So for me, that plus the fact that the future Zeno seems to move and react slightly differently from the current Zeno does mean that the future Zeno is more than he appeared to be. I think that Akira was hinting towards something when he decided to make them act slightly different from one another. I'm just not sure what that is. Hopefully the story of Dragon Ball will be continued and we will find out sooner rather than later. I'm curious to hear what you all think though. Is there a chance that the future Zeno is really just Zamasu in disguise? Or do you think that Zamasu's story arc ended and he was defeated when Goku had the future Zeno come in and destroy that timeline? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. We love to hear from you all. That's all for today. Remember, if you enjoyed today's nostalgic video, be sure to like this video and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the chance to travel back through time.